Welcome back. So, about a week ago, Jim, we sat down and we talked about MacArthur's reaction to the start of the Korean War. And we walked through kind of the first 2 weeks or so of that. And then we invited some questions from the audience, and we're going to go through those today and do that Q&A portion.
Mm,
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. First question. Who made the decision to abandon South Korea in 1948, 1949? Little loaded question.
Well, they were going to hold this election, like the UN temporary commission was coming in, and they had worked it out so that the Soviet military would withdraw at the same time as the 24th Corps would withdraw. And so Hodge, who's Lieutenant General John Hodge, who has the 24th Corps there, they all prepare that and get it ready to get it out. And then I think John Coulter is comes in right at the end of this period, and Hodge is gone. And the last few months, they pull out the 24th Corps the same time as the Soviets pull out. And then they create this Korean Military Advisory Group, which is only going to be about 500 officers that will then work to train the South Korean military. And so it was a something that I think they had, even gone back to the Moscow conference about when they would withdraw these
It had been
forces.
planned for a
Yeah,
while. Yeah.
Syngman Rhee was, very much against any kind of coordination with North Korea or the Soviets or anything. So it was not something anybody, was really looking forward to because it took the American power out of South Korea, and then it starts getting run by the State Department because MacArthur didn't want to have control of forces there that weren't able to defend themselves. That's what it kind
Right.
of seems,
Right.
to come out to be. That if he was going to have control there, they would have to be able to, you support this,
Yeah.
but they don't. That's not in the U.S. policy, at that time. And then it comes down to, are they really looking at South Korea as being part of that littoral defense, which is, that island chain that comes through? Because it does get left out of the State Department,
Hmm.
briefings by Atchison, and MacArthur does leave it out. So and I think that's why it was kind of a surprise when Truman was all in for going for it. But it's kind of U.S. policy,
Hmm.
so it's
And had been for a
yeah, and it's
while.
not like something that you say this guy did that, but it was it had just been looking as returning it to the South
Right.
Koreans.
And MacArthur's not opposed.
No, no.
Yeah.
Well, he said I think it all came to that defense
Right.
capability for those
If
people.
our forces there
Yeah,
can't
right.
do that,
Yeah.
then why
Now he
would we
does,
stay?
provide the logistics, the support for them from Japan, but it's very limited. Very limited.
Next question. Did MacArthur's successful maneuver in Luzon influence his decisions at the Battle of Taiwan? And was he inspired by any historical examples during the operations to establish the Pusan perimeter?
I don't know if he ever said, I did this because of, this historical thing. MacArthur, like Ed Drape, who's, one of the great military historians of American, he pointed out, MacArthur always trusts his instincts
Hmm.
and his experience more than anything. So I think you could definitely say that, he'd be looking at that. I mean,
Well, one's offensive, one's defensive,
well, I
sort
think,
of.
no, I think he's talking about the withdrawal from Lingayen Gulf at the beginning when the Japanese invade,
Okay.
and Wainwright does the pullback. At the different. I mean, that was, you know as
Yeah.
helter skelter as it's going to be for Dean and this, task
Okay.
force Smith, and these first task forces they put in there. But I think MacArthur thinks, they've got to not only try to do something to delay the
Right.
North Koreans, but they've got to do something to give some uh, moral sort of influence on the South Koreans as well. Because if they say, okay, we're coming in, and they just start going down and working in Pusan, and they're not helping, the South Korean forces, which are, haphazardly withdrawing from the North Koreans, they might have just fallen apart. You don't know. And so I think there's a lot of that balanced into it. I mean, the task forces do get wiped, pretty, and they were, under strength. And I think the only reason Task Force Smith gets thrown in is because they were actually doing plane loading training, where they get
Mhm.
on planes and,
Yeah.
and how they would be put into cut. And so they're the first ones that get put over there. But it does give Walker the time to set up
Right.
that Pusan. I mean, it's always going to be very tenuous, because they'll throw the Marines in there and
Yeah.
stop them, the 27th Wolfhounds, and they'll stop them. So I mean, it's a very close run thing, the whole way,
Mhm.
until Incheon springs it all open.
Right. All right. Next question. What was MacArthur's relationship with General Walker like?
It's very distant. I mean, Walker comes out there, and I don't think MacArthur sees him that much. It's like
Mhm.
Eighth Army is yours. And he's tasked with starting to train this force, because as they're drawing down that power from Japan, they want these occupation troops to start going into combat readiness. But I think they only get to be like battalion level. That they actually work with at this time. But, MacArthur doesn't see Walker a lot, at the like July 4th parade, things like that. I know that Walker and MacArthur's chief of staff, Edward Almond, can't stand each other. And so, I mean, that's got probably going to have some play in that as well. It basically came because the wives couldn't stand each other. Almond's
Oh,
wife and Walker's wife,
really?
and there was a lot of, jibing over
Yeah.
that. But that I don't think MacArthur trusts Almond or
Or
Walker.
Walker.
And
Yeah.
that's why, he's so involved in those entire first, 3 or 4 months, because he's monitoring them,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
that's why when Ridgway comes in, MacArthur knows Ridgway, and it's like, it's
You.
Eighth Army's yours,
Right.
and I think he feels when Ridgway comes in that he doesn't have to monitor them as much. I mean, I think, Walker does a great job. I think he doesn't delegate authority much,
Hmm.
because but he's very effective in that Pusan perimeter.
And I mean, when he dies, MacArthur
Oh yeah,
he
wants
says
to
some
give him
very
the
nice things
Medal
about
Medal of
you.
Honor, and
Yeah.
wants to give him full generalship. Um,
But
that Walker, when it came to them retreating from the Chinese, he saves the army.
yeah.
I mean, they lose contact with the Chinese, but
Yeah.
that's why Ridgway has an army to resurrect, because Walker
Walker
gets
saved
it
it.
gets it out of there. Yeah.
Would you say with MacArthur, if he's micromanaging you, it's he doesn't trust you, and if he lets you go, he trusts you, or is it more complicated than that?
It's probably more complicated. That I mean, I'm probably just
Mhm.
organizing it all in my own mind. But it they in World War II, when he's on Leyte, and like the corps commanders like Siebert and some of the division commanders, when MacArthur shows up, they don't like it, because he knows more about tactics than they do, and they're the whole time like is he questioning what I'm doing?
Yeah,
Is he worried about?
uncomfortable.
And that's the truth. That he knew his business, and no matter what people thought of him as as far as MacArthur being MacArthur, he knew his business.
Right. All right, next question. What was the working relationship like between the American and Korean military leaders at this early stage in the war?
Well, the Korean leaders are going through a lot of getting rid of people.
Mhm.
After I mean, because I think Che was the chief of staff, and then he becomes a division commander. As they go down, and a
Mhm.
lot of the guys get killed in the early days. Um, I think they're looking for any kind of response they can get, from the allies, the NATO people. The Secretary of Defense of the South Koreans is very close working, I know, with Muccio and some of these,
Mhm.
who's the ambassador there. but a lot of that military is fading, and other people are. That's like when Pak Sun Yup rises up
Okay.
at that, and gets noticed because they're, once everything happens,
Hmm.
you see what people are
Are
able to
capable
do,
of,
yeah,
yeah.
real quick. And so I think that Walker is able to work with people, and those corps commanders, but there's a lot of language friction
Right.
and not understanding each other, and sort of big brother little brother type
Hmm.
type type atmosphere that goes on. So it's very much in flux in those
Yeah.
early days.
What about MacArthur's contact? I mean, who's his main liaison?
With the Koreans,
Right.
Syngman Rhee. I
Okay.
mean,
But from a
yeah,
military
yeah,
standpoint.
yeah. No, I think he's got that Walker. That's
Okay.
his job because he's the
Okay.
the
So
the man
MacArthur
on the ground there,
with
and
Reed
and
and
he's
Walker
he's
with,
over
okay.
everything. Yeah.
All right. All right. Last question. Was MacArthur eager to take command in another war?
I don't know. I mean, there's the apocryphal story that supposedly MacArthur said Mars's last gift to an old warrior.
Hmm.
But I've never been able to find where he actually said
Yeah.
that. Um, and that was supposedly like when he was going on the first trip over there
Hmm.
to take the viewpoint on the 29th of June.
I'm sure he thought it was destiny, and I'm sure he would have been upset had anybody else been chosen before him.
Well, he's commander in chief
Yeah,
Far East. I mean,
yeah.
and there's
But I don't
that's
think he
it.
was, I don't think he loved war, and I don't think he thought,
No,
well, this is wonderful,
no.
So I think it was probably a mixture of, oh, great, here's another war, and well, of course I'm the most qualified.
Well, it's also uh, pull the rabbit out of the hat again. I mean, you've got a
Yeah, right.
horrible situation.
Yeah,
Oh, you go take care of that.
right,
And he does what he always does. It's like we were saying before. He goes by what he knows and what his experience is. So that first day he gets there, he's like amphibious op. That's what we did in World
right.
War II. That's what's going to happen now. And so I think it's kind of matter of fact in that sense. But I think that, like you said, the idea of destiny that he has.
Yeah,
Like once again, I'm in the saddle.
yeah.
I've got to
I've been
do
called to
this.
serve
Yes,
again.
and there
Hmm.
is no one that's going to be able to do this better
But
than
me.
me.
Yeah,
And that's you don't want a general that's. I don't feel like I'm up to it.
yeah. All right. Well, those were interesting questions. So
They were, and
thank
there's
you.
there's probably a lot better nuanced answers, and a lot worthy of a lot more study on my part for sure.
Mm, yeah. Well, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time, and thank you again to everyone for those questions. And we look forward to doing another one of these again in the future.